Hello to everybody who is joining. Tonight I'm going to be joined by Stephanie Velakis, who is a dietitian, the dietologist, nutritionist from Sydney, Australia, and we're going to be talking about fertility food myths. So she's just written a brilliant article which she's about to tell us about, so I'm just going to join her in now. Hello to those who are joining. It's very early for Stephanie in Australia. Just have to find out what time it is. I think it might even be 6. But thanks for those who are joining in the UK. I'm sure people... Hello, good morning.
Hey,
I was just saying that it's super early for you. What time is it?
it's 6 a.m. here.
AM. Thank you so much for coming on tonight. I just wanted to ask if you could introduce yourself, and then we'll talk about the topics that we're going to cover tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Stephanie Velakis, and I am a dietitian and nutritionist that specializes in fertility nutrition. And I'm based in Sydney, Australia, but I consult online around the world. And I'm really passionate about supporting women and couples who are trying to conceive to optimize their nutrition for the very best fertility outcomes, but also a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby.
Brilliant. And you also specialize in PCOS and endometriosis as well, don't you?
Yeah, some of the top presentations around fertility tend to be PCOS as well as endometriosis, thyroid disorders, and male factor infertility. So those are some of the key areas in which I work. So yeah, got to
Great.
get to the cause of the issue.
Yeah, of course, of course. So, for those who are joining, thank you. Stephanie has written a brilliantly detailed and insightful read on the Fertility Help Hub website. I posted about it today. The link is in the bio. So, once this is over, definitely read that for even more information. We've got something exciting to talk about at the end, which you're going to be giving us some more information about. But before we move on to that, lots of questions came in regarding not just the article and debunking myths around fertility nutrition, but some in particular. So I'll start off with some of those, if that's okay. And then for people who are watching, if you've got any questions whilst we're talking, please feel free to ask, and we'll answer, or Stephanie will answer them as soon as she can. So some of the questions were around supplements. So people were asking about things like DHEA and is it Ovacitol for low AMH? That was one of the questions. And really wanting to understand more about what is safe to take from a supplements point of view so that it's not too little, not too much. And then equally, if treatment works or you get pregnant naturally, it's safe to continue taking it throughout the pregnancy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, as a dietitian, it's one of those areas where we think going into the profession we're only ever going to talk about food and food only, but the reality of the matter, especially in fertility space, is that supplements are involved. Unfortunately, as a nutrition professional, I can't speak on the general terms in terms of supplements. It's kind of like talking about, you know, the exact milligrams of medication that you need for the IVF cycle as a doctor. You need to get individual advice on that. However, I will say that inside my program, which we're going to be talking about a little bit later, I have recently just added a whole ebook about how to choose a prenatal supplement, what to look for, and also the opportunity to get some one-on-one advice and have me review your supplement regime and see, okay, this is working for you, this isn't working for you, this would be safe in pregnancy, you should keep taking this, you should absolutely stop after a transfer, or should you get a positive pregnancy test. So I try and give as much advice about timing as well. And I think a common misconception is a lot of people don't realize, but the timing in the day in which you take supplements and what you take it with, whether you take it with food or not, actually doesn't make a difference to how much you're absorbing. So it's really important, especially if you're spending a lot of money on the supplements, which often they're very expensive, getting the most out of it. So it's really important that you get some professional advice around when to take it, what to take it with and what not to take it with. That's very important. So you can't beat, of course, professional one-on-one advice on those topics.
Yeah, of course. No, I understand. Moving on to food, would you like to give a bit of insight into the article that you wrote for us in terms of the 5 most common fertility nutritional myths, and what the evidence is there out there about them?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first one was pineapple, because I don't know if you can see, but I'm a little bit pineapple obsessed. It's one of my favorite fruits, and just everything in my world is pineapple related. And it's also the symbol for the fertility community. And so I know so many women talk about the pineapple core, especially around implantation and after a transfer. So I wanted to talk about this one. So the reason why I don't know why that the pineapple became this thing around implantation, but from a scientific perspective, there might be some suggestion around the enzyme bromelain. And bromelain is actually a protein digesting enzyme, which is why when you eat pineapple, you get kind of that tongue fairy feeling sometimes. If it's quite an acidic kind of pineapple, and that's because it's literally digesting your proteins, and that enzyme can have a very mild, potentially blood thinning effect. And so that's what it's theorized to do to help support implantation, by improving the blood flow to the reproductive organs, and therefore helping support implantation. However, there's never been any research done on this topic, so we don't know whether it would be clinically beneficial. However, we don't know if it would be harmful either. On the other side of the coin, I know I get lots of questions about pineapple causing miscarriage.
Really?
And so, yeah, and a couple of other foods as well. Papaya in some Southeast Asian countries was apparently used to induce miscarriages in some kind of like I don't want to say old wives' tale, but like in a folk culture kind of way that they would use papaya. But there's not been any research to suggest that either of these foods would actually cause that. So all these fears around what foods are safe before and after and when exactly, it can be extraordinarily stressful to know what to eat anymore. So yeah, it can be quite overwhelming. Some of the other topics I talked about in the article, I'm just trying to think back. Dairy foods being avoided when trying to conceive. I think this is probably, alongside gluten, probably one of the top foods that gets avoided when trying to conceive. Again, there's not really much evidence, with the absence of, intolerances or allergies, for example, that there's much benefit to doing this. In fact, the biggest studies that we have on fertility, the Nurses' Health Study in the United States, actually showed that women who consumed some full cream dairy had reduced risks of anovulation or not ovulating. So we actually think that there's a potential benefit. However, I understand some people either ethically abstain from dairy or just doesn't sit well with them, digestively speaking. So I would really encourage you to try and find a calcium fortified alternative to help support your bone health, because ultimately when you become pregnant, you need to then build baby's bones, and that has to come from somewhere, and often that is you, your own bones, unfortunately. So it's really important to get enough calcium in your diet. Most supplements, especially prenatals, do not contain anywhere near adequate amounts of calcium to cover you. So just because of how it needs to be formulated, it's no fault of their own. So that just must be something you have to be incredibly mindful of in your diet. Yeah.
Okay. And someone's just asked, which is something that I was quite obsessed with when I was having IVF. What are your thoughts on the on all foods being organic?
Such a good one. I think if you can afford it whilst going through IVF at the same time, go for it. Look, absolutely, I think it's something that you should look at, especially if you have endometriosis, is where the research is at the moment. Based on the research, there's some suggestion that things like digoxins, which are found in the pesticides that we spray our fruits and veggies with, for example, can create more endometriosis or make it worse, for example. So that would be one scenario. However, for everybody else, I wouldn't consider it essential. It's an optional extra. I tend to find when women and men switch to organic, they don't eat enough volume because of the additional expense. So then they're compromising on the total load of fiber and antioxidants that they could be getting from fruits and vegetables by actually eating adequate amounts. Mm-hmm. So wash them really well, and take advantage of, I think, frozen as well. They tend to be a little bit more affordable. Yeah, and seasonal, if you can, as much as possible. Seasonal fruit and vegetables will give you so much more nutrition than things that are out of season.
Okay, so that's a good point, actually, and one I didn't really think about, but fresh versus frozen, there's not really a difference there?
No, in fact, I always used to actually went on this, this takes me back to a memory. I used to do this high school tour around New South Wales in Australia, and that was one of the topics that I would talk to the high school students about was they thought that frozen foods weren't as nutritious because we associate it, I don't know, with TV dinners or something like that, but frozen produce like berries or peas or corn or like fruits and veggies, they are basically snap frozen at their peak ripeness, which means that the maximal nutrition is I kind of say frozen in time. It's kind of like a time capsule. And then once you defrost it, that nutrition is still remaining. Whereas fresh is great, but at the same time in transportation, different temperature fluctuations, that can affect potentially sensitive nutrients like your B vitamins especially.
Wow, okay. Someone just asked, how much protein would you recommend? And obviously we need to caveat that you can't give people advice. It needs to be general, but how much protein would you generally recommend during IVF? And we'll move on to caffeine as well, because that was one of the points in the myths article.
Yes, that was one. Thank you for reminding me. How much protein would you recommend during IVF? I think that it's a loaded question because I think some people sit really well on a kind of higher protein style diet and some people just don't. And it really is dependent, I think, on your insulin sensitivity in particular, because that will give us a gauge of how much carbohydrate. I talk a lot about this inside the program, and actually instead of telling people what to do, and I think as a dietitian in this field, I get a lot of people come to me and just like, tell me what to do and I'll do it.
Yeah, I'll follow anything. Yeah, I know.
Right. But what I found running this program in the past was that that's how people initially came in, but then they were like, oh, there's so much value in actually working this out, like understanding, getting the knowledge, feeling empowered and working it out for myself, and working out, oh, this is how much protein that works for me, or this is how much carbs that work for me, not your next door neighbor, not your best friend who's going through IVF, like for you personally. And sometimes that requires a little bit of experimentation. But if I was to suggest, roughly, I would say aim for a portion of protein at your 3 main meals. And if you have additional protein requirements, you may need to increase that further. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And another question that's come in, what foods to avoid during IVF? And there was also one that came in before we started our live, which was, is it okay to eat processed foods such as pizza once a week?
Oh, yeah, I saw that question too. I've gotten a lot this week in my Q&A too, and I'm like, oh, this is so sad that people don't think that they can eat their fun foods.
I know.
You can absolutely, the thing is, often this journey is not as short as we would hope it to be. And so I talk a lot about sustainability. It's not a sprint, right? And at the end of the day, this is the stuff that you need to be able to continue to practice into your pregnancy and continue to practice and role model to your future children. So we really want to embrace all foods fit. We really want to embrace, a weekend and having some social event and your mental health, your social life. We need that because part of how you de-stress, or that's part of how, like, it's just part of normal life. So I really encourage all my clients to have some of that in their life. And I actually get really worried when people are too perfect. Like if they eat and they're like, I'm doing this, I never eat. I'm like, I get worried. My homework actually for them ends up being, please go and eat a takeaway tonight. Like,
Really?
please.
Yeah.
Embrace.
Otherwise it's not sustainable, is it?
Not at all. You just burn out on it. And I just, yeah, I'm a really big believer that yes, it is a healthy diet is part of the picture, but it's not the whole thing. And so as a result, if you put all your eggs in that basket, you're gonna feel burnt out at some point. So it needs to be sustainable. It's of course you're doing it for the short-term goal of trying to conceive, but I want you to think about it beyond that and think about it like a marathon. You know, marathon runners, they get sports drinks along the way, they stop, they have toilet breaks, you know, they don't just go for 43 kilometers, they have little pit stops. And you need to do that for yourself too, whether that be with food or whether that be with self-care or whether that be with whatever, it doesn't matter, but having that there is so important. I guess having it, that's the other side of the coin, but if it's once a week, I wouldn't worry about it. Neglect.
Yeah, exactly. If it keeps you happy too. I guess it's like fad diets, isn't it? That if you go to, you know, really strict and then suddenly you've lost the weight you wanted to lose, go back to how you were eating before, normally the weight just piles back on and maybe even a bit more. So it's kind of like looking at a long-term, not solution, but way of life, isn't it? Just well-being.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes when you're trying to conceive or you're having a tough time trying to conceive, it's kind of like that initial motivation that helps you get onto maybe some healthier eating patterns, or exercising more or sleeping better or taking better care of your mental health or whatever it is. It's that initial thing. But then what's going to help maintain that when things get difficult or when that part of your life is over as well? Like, hopefully eventually that part of your life will be over, at least for a short amount of time or a long amount of time. So we want to actually set it up so that it is helping you beyond that as well.
Yeah, agreed. And just thinking back to the article that you wrote about, and I know there are a couple of questions here that we need to go back to, but gluten is a huge one, isn't it? What are your thoughts on gluten?
Oh, I've been getting this one like more than a lot recently. I don't know if it's like peaked again in trends. I don't know what's going on. So I think number one, what's really important is define what gluten actually is. So gluten, people go, oh, it's bread pasta. I'm like, no, that's not what gluten is. Gluten is the protein that we find in wheat, barley, and rye. And for some people, a medical condition known as celiac disease, which is an autoimmune reaction to gluten in the intestine that actually causes inflammation and damage at the site. That can then affect nutrient absorption, and it can affect both male and female fertility when it's not well controlled. And the only management of celiac disease is a very strict gluten-free diet. So I'm talking about, you can't share a butter knife with somebody who spread their wheat toast with your gluten-free toast. That is the level of strictness that we're talking about. It's not like, oh, yeah, I'm going to eat a gluten-free lunch and then I'm going to have a cake for dessert. Like, it's not a lifestyle choice. It's mandatory. And so celiac disease is something that I always talk about, because it needs to be ruled out before you cut out gluten in your diet. Because if you do experience a benefit from a gluten-free diet, you're never going to really know if that's because you actually had undiagnosed celiac disease, which affects about 1 in 70 people, which is actually quite a lot of people, or if you just had some kind of intolerance issue. And if you feel good off it, you're not going to reintroduce it for 6 weeks to get yourself tested, right? So it's actually important that you do the testing first before you then decide to do a gluten-free diet. The second thing is most people aren't aware that gluten-free diets have an increased risk of nutritional deficiencies. So we have increased risk of not getting enough fiber, not getting enough zinc, which is really important for male fertility, for sperm health, but also for egg health. We know that when the egg and the sperm meet, there's like a firework of zinc that occurs. So we think that zinc's really important in early embryo development. So we need enough zinc. That's critical. Some gluten-free breads don't have folic acid or iodine added back in, so that might be another thing to consider. And as well, we just see that a general poorer nutritional quality diet in people who follow a gluten-free diet, and we think that's because they're using a lot of gluten-free products, so like one-to-one products. So instead of using whole wheat bread, they're using gluten-free bread, which is more refined and maybe has more fat and more sugar or something else, right? Or not enough fiber. Or instead of buying a whole grain cracker, you're stuck with a rice cracker, which is more refined again, maybe less ingredients, but not enough fiber, not really much nutrition. And so as a result, when we do these swaps, we're not getting the same nutritional quality that we were getting before. Now, I think a lot of people in my practice, I talk a lot about the difference between gluten, which is the protein, and the carbohydrates that come with wheat, especially fructans, because a lot of people have digestive sensitivities to gluten, tends to be the biggest thing. But as well, we also need to normalize that some digestive sensitivity is okay, and we don't need to overmanage. And that's probably the biggest thing. Like, a lot of women get really upset when they get bloated after a meal because of how they appear, which I totally appreciate. However, bloating and gas and having bowel movements is actually normal, and we need to have some tolerance for these normal bodily functions. It's normal to feel a bit bloated after you have a big bowl of pasta. It's normal to feel bloated after you eat a pizza because you've had maybe more volume of food than you used to, and it's also attracting a lot of water. If you're in incredible amounts of pain, or you are having abnormal things happening where you can't get out of bed, it's affecting your work or your life or your social life, absolutely that's not normal. Get yourself some advice. But for the most part, I'm seeing like a lot of these digestive things probably being a little bit overmanaged sometimes, instead of quite conservatively managed, which is a risk in itself, because when we overmanage, again, we're restricting, we create other issues. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you for that detailed answer. That's really helpful. And any recommendations for anovulation and a lower AMH?
Yeah. I'll start with the low AMH first, because it's probably the shorter answer. Low AMH is a tricky one, because from a biological perspective, we can only do so much. We can't create more eggs. We can't really increase it. We can get an improvement in blood level based on some nutrients. So if you are vitamin D deficient, you will see a false lowering of your AMH on bloods. So if you are significantly vitamin D deficient, especially, once you replenish that, you'll notice that your AMH number will probably increase. The other thing is, if your prenatal or any supplements you are taking contains the nutrient biotin, which is vitamin B7, that nutrient will actually falsely elevate your AMH. So sometimes what happens with some of the women I work with is they come in quite vitamin D deficient, low AMH. We correct vitamin D, but we also start them on a prenatal. That prenatal contains biotin. They go and do their test, and they're like, wow, my AMH is like so much better. And I'm like, yay. But also I explain to them, I'm like, oh, it's not really like what it truly is. And that's the thing. That number isn't the number of eggs you've got in the bank, so to speak. So it's a proxy measurement, and as a result, proxies are sensitive to other things, and you have to be aware of that. But my biggest thing would be focusing on egg quality instead of egg quantity, and really loading up your diet with antioxidants and omega-3 fats and These are all things that I talk about inside my programs. So one of the first things is literally, I think on the first video I talk about is egg quality and making sure that we're getting enough of all these nutrients and foods to help with managing.
Great. Why don't, if you wouldn't mind answering this question that's just come through, and then let's talk about your new program, because I'd love to hear more, and I'm sure everyone listening would like to hear how they can benefit from it as well.
Absolutely.
What was any advice for hormone imbalance or pH balance?
Oh, this is so interesting. How lovely. Amazing. Great. I'm benefiting. Hormone imbalance, and it's such a vague, it's such a vague, all-encapsulating term, right? And the thing about hormones is I like to talk about it, and I feel like I'm the queen of analogies, but I like to talk about it like a symphony or an orchestra. Every single instrument has to be tuned. Every single, person has to be in time, on the right time, and then there's the conductor, right? And the conductor, if he drops the ball, then, the symphony might become out of tune, or they lose the plot in the music. And that's basically how hormones work too. And yes, there is a delicate balance, so to speak. However, what that looks like for one person, the other person isn't expected to be the same. So the term hormone imbalance, without knowing exactly what's going on, is so broad. So, like, for example, if a woman with PCOS comes to me and says, I have hormone imbalance, and I look at her blood records, I'm like, okay, I understand what she's talking about now. Her androgens are really high, her LH-FSH ratio isn't ideal, and her, like, a couple of other markers are out. Okay, I understand what I'm dealing with here. Versus a woman with endometriosis, which might look on record fine, I know underlying the physiology that there's high levels of circulating estrogen and potentially insufficient progesterone. So let's focus on that. That's a completely different focus area to somebody with PCOS. And then again, that's a completely different focus area to someone with thyroid hormone abnormalities. And I think that on the other side of the coin, people think hormones just mean reproductive hormones, but we have so many hormones in our body. We have thyroid hormones, we have insulin, which is also a hormone. We have so many hormones to think about. So it depends what we're talking about, and you really need to be very specific when we talk about anything related to hormones and nutrition or health in general. You need to be really specific.
Yeah.
On pH balance, our body will not change pH, nor should it, otherwise we would literally die. So our body buffers our pH within a very, very tight range, literally 0.2 of a difference, and nothing we eat or drink will change that. So it doesn't matter if you drink alkaline water, or, I mean, obviously if you drank like something awful for you like carboxylic acid, obviously you'd be in trouble. But in general, foods like lemon juice or alkaline water, or I don't know what's in green smoothies, they're not going to change your pH. And if they did, you'd be in a lot of medical trouble. So we really, just be really mindful of anyone that's trying to sell you kind of acid base balance kind of products, because it's not going to do anything for you, unfortunately.
Well, thanks for clearing that up. Another question that came through beforehand, which I was actually interested to hear the answer of too, was how much water is too much water? Because obviously we all know that drinking water is really good for general health and for losing weight and for organs and everything, but how much is too much?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I think before I go into this, I think the biggest message I could give is if you are experiencing excessive thirst, such as, and we call that polydipsia, that would be a reason to go and chat to your doctor, because excessive thirst can be a sign of diabetes, because we actually, when we have excessive thirst, that means we're urinating out more glucose in our urine. And so that's our body's way of trying to create balance in a sense. So that would be the first thing. We're talking about excess amounts of water, and it feels like you're waking up in the night to scull, a litre or more of water. That would be something I would be concerned about, and would be sending you back to your doctor to have a discussion about and getting tested for. So hate to do the scary thing first, but the scary thing out the way. I would say the best indication is your urine, because everybody's fluid needs is a little bit different based on body size, based on activity level, based on what you do for work, like so many different factors. So the best way to know is if your urine is a pale yellow color, you're well hydrated. If your urine is dark, you're not well hydrated. And if your urine is looking like water on the way out, maybe you're a little bit overhydrated. And so basically your body's biofeedback is, hey, what color's the urine? Hey, how much water have I drunk today? And then linking those two things up together.
And it's normal, isn't it, for urine to be darker in the morning, for example, when you've been asleep?
Absolutely, absolutely. Very normal. You haven't been hydrated all night, so that's very normal. So you look at kind of in the daytime, what color you.
Great, thank you. So for anyone who's joined now or who's been listening, Stephanie has written a brilliant article for Fertility Help Hub. If you haven't seen it already, go to the link in the bio and take a read. And now I want to ask you all about the waiting game. So tell us about the waiting game.
Yes, so the waiting game is my second round of my live online group program, and it is designed to help women who are trying to conceive optimize their nutrition for fertility. And I originally designed it back in March, April, when COVID had just hit, and I was absolutely flooded with DMs, emails, text messages from just women around the world, but my clients as well, being just devastated that they can't go through some fertility treatments and testing even, and it was I couldn't do anything. I couldn't help them to get to where they needed to be, right? And I just felt so sad by it all that I was like, okay, what can I do for these people to help them in a really tangible way? And so I thought, okay, this is a forced pause, right? It's a forced pause. It's awful in so many ways, but I'm very much an opportunistic kind of person. So I was like, this is an opportunity for people to actually go, oh, I actually have time now to focus on my diet and nutrition, because the number one thing I get in my clinic is, oh, I don't have time. Oh, there's not enough time until my next transfer. Oh, there's not enough time until egg collection. Will that work in time? Whereas I was like, oh my God, we don't even know how much time we're going to have.
Yeah, we don't have this opportunity again. Yeah.
Will we ever get this opportunity again? And that's why I originally designed it. And I had 44 women join, which was amazing. And it's basically it's kind of a hybrid program. You get access to an online portal which walks you through the top fertility nutrition strategies that I use with my clients every day. And these are things that are based on science and also what I have seen is the most effective. And like I said earlier, it's really not designed to tell you what to do and just do it. And I think a lot of people came in thinking it would be a meal plan and see you later. And, you know, here's your 5 meals for the week and just cook these meals. It's not. It's designed to actually educate you and empower you. Yes, give you recipe inspiration, and yes, give you social support through the Facebook community. And like I go live like for a whole hour every week, answer questions, and go into the group and answer questions on the comments, and I just loved the group so much, because women would post what they're eating in the day, like, yeah, I'm getting my colors in, like Steph said, or I'm using this new food, or I'm not really into fish. Does anyone have any ideas of how I could try and get some fish in? And that aspect of it, that community aspect, I was like, this is what we need. Like, this is what women need. We need support, and they just need guidance in the right direction. And I wasn't sure if I was going to bring it back again, because I was like, oh, well, COVID was kind of wrapping up here in Australia in the sense that fertility treatments were back. And I was like, oh, maybe that'll be it. But I just got so much feedback that was overwhelmingly positive. Like 96% of women were like, I would recommend this to a friend who was trying to conceive. And so I was like, all right, so I should do this again. And that's why I brought it back. But I did want to take on the feedback that I had from round one and apply it. So I've added in more about prenatal supplement selection that I'm able to offer in a group setting versus one-on-one. And also I added in a ebook on nutrition for male fertility as well, because that was another question. And I've also added in quizzes that, I mean, optional, but a lot of people want to be able to assess their knowledge, and so I also added that in. So it's 4 weeks. Each week is 1 to 2 new topics. You work through it on your own pace in the portal, and then you come into the group, and each week we consolidate what we've learned. A live session, answer any questions, and inside the group there's lots of recipe inspiration as well, and sometimes I go live in my kitchen and do a little bit of cooking with everybody. That was fun. We did like a mocktail session, and we did like a burrito bowl together, and it's just real, like, honestly, it was what I needed to help during that difficult time. It was just really fun.
Right.
And
so I guess it's a hybrid, isn't it? So for people who are spending a lot of money on treatments, for example, and don't necessarily have the extra cash, especially at the moment, to have one-on-one sessions, it's a great way to get benefits, isn't it, for a cheaper price?
Absolutely, yeah. So I was talking to a few dietitian colleagues of mine who work in this space, and they were like, Steph, that's too cheap. The program is too cheap. But it was actually part of the feedback was people like, this is actually like affordable. Like, I can actually get expert advice, not Dr. Google stuff anymore. Without breaking the IVF bank, or without breaking the bank in general. It's a really affordable way to access me in a group setting. Sure, it's not exactly the same as one-on-one advice, but I have added an option to upgrade at a discounted fee to get a one-on-one session with me if you felt like you needed that to help tailor things to you, or if you had something really specific medically that wouldn't fit into a group setting, then I've added that option in because that's what was requested. But yeah, it's 147 Australian dollars or 100 US dollars roughly for 4 weeks of all the portal that you get access to, plus me actually live supporting you, coaching you through it. And yeah, I mean,
less than £25 a week for all of that information. That's brilliant. And you're offering the first 30% off on top of that, aren't you? Yeah. I don't know if you've reached that number yet, but that's brilliant.
Oh, we haven't yet. So those spots at that price are still available. So yes, I would get in quickly because I just checked my phone earlier and there's quite a few new people who have signed up. So yes, I'm not sure exactly where the numbers are at right this moment, but absolutely get in to get it at that slightly discounted rate as well.
Cool. So if you guys want to find out more about it, then either you can contact Stephanie directly, the dietologist, or you can go to the Fertility Help Hub website. The link is in the bio, and you'll see Stephanie's brilliant article, which has beautiful picture of food. And in that article, you'll read all about the program and how you can sign up. So someone's just asked that question. Or you can message me directly, and I can put you in touch with Stephanie. So many ways you can get in touch with Stephanie, either through the website, my website, or through us directly.
Absolutely. Yes, that's a great question. Actually, I might just answer that. How do you manage the time difference with UK people? Yeah, it's a great point. So what I do is the portal is accessible anytime. So every Monday the content goes live. You've got the whole week, anytime to access that material. And then I go live 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. So I don't know what time that is in the UK, but the replay is the replay is so you can go back in any time, and I always come back. So people were like, oh, I can't quite make it, I'm not quite home yet from work or whatever, even here in Sydney. I had a lot of people join from Sydney. And I was like, that's cool. You can come back in any time, watch the video. If you've got more questions, just leave a hashtag and I'll come back and I'll actually answer that question for you. That's fine. Or I'll roll it over into the next week. So I'm happy to do that. Yeah,
Brilliant,
absolutely.
thank you. And a couple of questions from me. I don't know whether people need to know these answers right away, but when is the best time to do this course? So it starts on the 22nd of June, but in terms of if you're preparing for a cycle, or you're midway through a cycle, or you're trying to conceive naturally, like, who is it aimed for and at what point?
Yeah, I think honestly, I always think any time is a good time. It's never too late. And I think as well, it's the time that you're ready. And I know that probably sounds so like vague and philosophical in a way, but it's so true. Like, if you're not ready to make a change, don't do it. And like, that's probably not the best marketing on my behalf, but honestly,
Yeah,
that's what
needs
I
to be
want.
committed. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So if you feel ready, it doesn't matter if I had somebody email me last night saying, we're using a donor egg, will that matter? No, because you need to create a receptive uterine environment for a baby, and you need to actually build your nutrient stores to support a pregnancy. And so, yeah, I think it's any time. If you are going for an egg collection, if you're in the middle of a FET, if you are building like ramping up for an FET, if you are trying to conceive unassisted for the last 5 or 6 months, or 1 month, or 6 years, it's never too late to get a new perspective. I actually had a call with somebody from the program. And yeah, we were just talking about what she had learned and what she got out of it. And yeah, she was like, you know what, Steph, I realized I just didn't eat enough in the day to get all the nutrients I needed. I was replacing meals with coffee and trying to get through the day, coffee or tea, and replacing that. And then I hadn't eaten until 2 p.m. She's like, by the time it gets 2 p.m., there's no way that I could get all these foods and nutrients into my day. And so she's like, since I've been doing like what you've said and in the program and applied it, I've really noticed that my period regularity has improved, for example. So that was that was amazing for me to hear, because that's a huge win when you're trying to conceive. If you have a regular period, regular ovulation, that's amazing. So yeah, I mean, I think there's never a bad time to start. Honestly, I mean, if there's specific, very, very specific situations, and there was a couple that popped up last time, please just email me or send me a DM. And if something else is a better fit for you, I will tell you honestly, and give you that advice. So some people just fit a one-on-one consult better. They have a lot going on, fair enough. But if that's not in your budget, I would say this is probably the most budget-friendly way to access me, my services, my guidance. Yeah, absolutely.
And a community as well. Sounds amazing.
Yeah, oh, I know. It was so amazing. I was like, I'm so lucky. How did I get this amazing group of people? It was seriously amazing. I really loved it.
Thank you, Stephanie. One last question, and we have covered this sort of. What makes NAD plus beneficial for egg quality if you have a low AMH? And we did talk about that earlier. So would you mind just giving a quick recap on low AMH? So we're talking about quality over quantity.
Yeah, so obviously quantity matters to a degree because it gives you a time frame. But AMH is a proxy measure of egg count. It's not a direct measure. So it is sensitive to other factors. So for example, vitamin D being very deficient, you will get a false lowering effect, or incorporating biotin or vitamin B7 will give you a false elevation in AMH. I'm not particularly sure about NAD+. I will not comment on anything I don't know about. I just go away and do my research and I'll come back to you. So maybe can you send me a DM, and I will check that out and circle back to you on that specific thing. But yeah, that would be my big tips, is just be careful of where your other nutrients and supplements are coming from around the time of testing. And the other side of the coin is focus on equality. Try and make them as high quality as possible. And those 3 to 6 months before you conceive, really get those antioxidants in, omega-3s, all that good stuff. And I really encapsulate that in the program and walk you through how to practically do that, because I'm a very, very practical person. I love the information, but we've got to actually do the doing, and that's what the program's all about.
Yeah. Okay. All right, great. And we have, this is a whole probably topic in itself, but vitamin D.
Yes, vitamin D. It depends on where you live, right? So you guys in the UK, I think in winter you're take it, right? Here in Australia, we don't. And yeah, I think test your blood. Test your blood. Like, get it tested. And then you'll know. Because it is a fat-soluble vitamin. So as a result, this nutrient can build up. And I've seen it very rarely, I will say, in my practice. But women end up taking mega doses of vitamin D, and it goes too high. And the thing is, your body isn't going to excrete it like a B vitamin. Like if you take too much folic acid, it'll end up in your wee, no problem. But with vitamin A, D, E, K, that is not the case. It sits in your body for a long period of time. It can create problems. So we don't want to overdo it. Obviously, we don't want to underdo it. We've got to find that middle ground, and it is one of those ones that we can test in our blood. We should test it and correct based on that. And it obviously depends on the season. So right now we're here in winter in Australia. We'll be in our houses for the last 3 months. Our vitamin D status collectively as a nation is probably not the best. So you can tell by my pale complexion that I'm not getting much sun at the moment.
Same here. We've had rain all day. So yeah, really good response. Thank you. And someone's just said that was fantastic. Thank you. They've signed up, and they're looking forward to it because it's just what they were looking for. So that's great. If you want to sign up, speak to Stephanie or come to the Fertility Help Hub website, find her article and sign up through that. So lots of options. Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for your time, Stephanie, and joining us at 6 a.m. your time. We'll speak to you soon.
Speak soon, Eloise. Thanks everyone.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.